Hey everybody, it's Jenna. It's time. The Fantastic Four First Steps is now in theaters, and I'm honestly still overwhelmed. I know people have been eagerly awaiting and kind of mad at me for not posting this video any sooner, but I just did not have the ability to make it happen amid the flurry and exhaustion of San Diego Comic-Con. Part of that was because I definitely needed to see it a second time while taking copious notes, which I have now done, so I'm ready to dive in. The first thing I will start off by saying is there is so much that this movie does right. Pretty perfect even. The aesthetics of the 60s world are so fully realized. The mid-credit scene and larger MCU connections are much more standalone than I had worried they would be. It's crazy that there's not even any acknowledgement of the Thunderbolts post-credit scene. And the cast is phenomenal. Truly, I can and will sing the praises of the main four over the course of this video. The analogy I've been using ever since my first watch is this movie feels like a vivid dream that I had after reading a bunch of random FF back issues. But just like in a vivid dream, there is something in the execution of the plot and the story that is just missing for me. It's not just that there are nearly a dozen different shots or scenes that we literally saw in the actual trailers that didn't make it into the movie, with director Matt Shakman saying that there would be too much VFX involved in bringing his quote-unquote director's cut to life. It's that the movie, for lack of a better term, is so plot-heavy and is so focused on solving the Galactus problem that it feels like certain character-focused beats fall to the wayside. For a team that essentially got their start as a bunch of big personalities who argue with each other at every available turn, they're almost too well-oiled of a machine in this movie, and certain individual moments or dynamics between the four or with the world around them are left unexplored, on the back burner, or what we now know to be deleted scenes. For a movie that does stunning things to distill what the FF's world is like in the comics, I kept finding myself worrying if more casual fans or even just general audience members were being made to care about these characters as much as I already do. Again, I'm not saying that I didn't love the movie, and I genuinely cannot believe that we got this close to perfection, especially after the previous movies. But there are things, mainly in the edit, that stopped this movie from being truly perfect for me. Either way, there is so much to talk about, so I'll just run through it all in mostly chronological order. I will talk about the Jack Kirby of it all much later, but I love the decision to label their Earth as 828, as a reference to Jack's birthday, August 28th, 1917. As someone who was basically leading the charge on this channel about the transatlantic accents in this movie, and was so worried that they would not make it into the final cut at all, I'm so glad that the cast, especially Pedro and Vanessa, kept their own versions wherever they could. The accent, which combines a melodic way of speaking with certain over-enunciated vowels, has been used throughout modern media, but is best known and beloved by me for its prevalence in classic movies. Pedro Pascal had previously told Vanity Fair that
they had to keep on pulling me back from a very mid-Atlantic, early 60s kind of like talk. They had a dialect coach that was sort of going to help us into that kind of dialect. And I took to it so well that they had to pull, they were like, we actually, because I was like, well, welcome to the family, July 25th, summer 20, and they were like, talk more like yourself. And I had a hard time doing that.
I am so glad that that was the case. I wish that it was more consistent from everybody throughout, but I still appreciated the softness of it when we heard it. The pregnancy test that Sue uses in the very first scene of the movie says Storkshire, not Starkshire, which I'm sure everyone would have obviously thought would have been a nod to Howard or Tony Stark. I am glad that they did not go that route, both because the optics of either of them engineering a pregnancy test would be very funny, and because this movie is at its best when it's unencumbered by the expectations of the quote-unquote MCU that may or may not be surrounding it. The recap montage on the Ted Gilbert Show is interesting to me. I love the decision to have us hear but not see them getting attacked by the cosmic rays, but a part of me does wish that we hadn't seen most of these fight scenes in the trailers, especially when the majority of the movie is understandably not very action heavy. But what we do get is great. We see Giganto, as well as the team very briefly wearing their original comic accurate suits. Created by Jack and Stan Lee all the way back in Fantastic Four #1, Giganto is a giant mutant kaiju brought to life by Crow and the Deviants. Yes, those very same ones from Eternals, and ultimately adopted by Mole Man, who I will get more into in a bit. Mole Man repeatedly uses Giganto to cause havoc across the surface world, mainly to destroy chemical plants or other things that are harming Subterranea. Mole Man, who is played brilliantly and hilariously by Paul Walter Hauser, also debuted in FF #1 and is the codename of Harvey Elder. Shunned by the surface world for his conspiracy theories, including the existence of a hollow Earth, Harvey soon learns that his theories are accurate, and he becomes the leader of the planet's underground layer, Subterranea. In addition to deploying Giganto and other kaiju, Mole Man also does his schemes by sinking Earth buildings down to Subterranea Subterranea, just like he does with the Pan Am building in the movie. Jumping ahead, I just adore the fact that Subterranea is its own existing weird thing in this universe. I also think the scene when he visits the Baxter building is one of the funniest in the entire movie without a doubt. The line of "Don't be mad at me, Johnny, I didn't dress you" has rattled around in my brain basically ever since. And I also just love the clear admiration that he has for Sue, because honestly, same. I totally agree with the jokes online that he idolizes her like he's a gay man on Stan Twitter. We also get a mention of the Mad Thinker, who was created by Jack and Stan in 1963's Fantastic Four number 15. An inventor and crime boss with the ability to precisely predict everything, he spends his tenure very jealous of Reed, all while creating a string of robots and other inventions to try to get a leg up in the supervillain world. One of those robots is Awesome Andy, who I love dearly, in part because he became a very endearing part of She-Hulk's comic supporting cast. And after hearing the report that John Malkovich's Red Ghost was cut from the movie entirely, I really mourned the loss of his super apes, because, as I've made clear time and time again on this channel, I love all of the bizarre ways that monkeys and apes factor into superhero stories. So imagine my surprise when we at least got one of the monkeys here, as well as animated versions of the team in the post-credit scene. I'll take it. Created by Lee and Kirby in 1963's Fantastic Four number 13, Red Ghost is a Soviet-era mad scientist who controls and abuses a trio of monkeys as his underlings in an effort to recreate the FF's cosmic accident and get powers for themselves. It's a little thing, but one of the many newspapers and magazines mentions that Ben spoke at the Heisman Trophy ceremony, which is a nice little nod to his pre-accident football career. During this montage, we can see the actors from Roger Corman's 1994 Fantastic Four movie, something that was a little bit of an open secret beforehand, especially because the cast also attended the premiere. That movie is a whole separate can of worms, inspiring documentaries and oral histories and an entire storyline on Arrested Development. As someone who fondly remembers watching a bootleg copy of it back in college, I love that the cast are getting their flowers in the experience of this new movie, but I would love more than anything for at least some of their work to maybe see the light of day. Okay, so this Easter egg was made in a lab especially for me. During the baby-proofing montage, Michael Giacchino's excellent score gives way to the song Nation on Wheels, which was produced by George Bruns for Disneyland in the 1960s. It started out as an instrumental track for TV specials and the World's Fair before being used on part of the Disneyland version of the People Mover. As a People Mover fan who has already yapped at length about how the FF and Tomorrowland need to collaborate even more beyond costume characters in the park, I am very happy. I knew that Matt Shackman knew ball when it came to the comics, but nothing could have prepared me for getting the invisibility ultrasound scene in live action. The moment from Fantastic Four number 50 actually concerns Sue giving birth to Valeria, but I admire the gumption. Let's talk about Ben. I think Eben Moss-Backrack did an incredible job, and I still think the decision to make his voice less modulated added so much softness to his performance. But man, I wish we had even more of him. It's not even just my own personal love for the character, or my hope that he would have become the MCU's new darling the way that he was in the comics for literal decades. It's just my feeling that he is relatively unchanged by the events of this movie. I love, love, love that he is the rock of the family's dynamic, and that he's reading baby books and is already chummy with Johnny, and is clearly happy with his found family. But it feels like we're starting to dip towards him dealing with his transformation and his public perception and his future just as his own person, only for the movie to pull back entirely. And that honestly bums me out. Natasha Lyonne's Rachel Rosman is an original character, but also spiritually not, because her last name is a reference to Jack's wife, Rosalind Kirby. As someone who has always wanted Ben's girlfriend turned wife, Alicia Masters, saved for a post-Secret Wars sequel, and was more willing to bet on Leone voicing Herbie before playing Alicia, I am happy that we ultimately got something else here. Also, as much as I love Ben being beloved by his neighborhood, I wish we had more of the Yancey Street gang. I guess you could argue that these two kids running away and asking what about our families count, but this movie could have had them throwing cabbages at him and wearing silly disguises, and it wouldn't have seemed out of place at all. Also, the bit of Ben yelling at the retrofuturistic kitchen is great. Go watch the absolutely bonkers movie The Glass Bottom Boat if you want even more of that very specific kind of humor. When Reed talks about baby-proofing the world, we get offhanded references to even more FF villains.
That's it? No.
First is Puppet Master, created by Jack and Stan in 1962's Fantastic Four number 8, also known as vindictive and often abusive scientist Philip Masters. He controls people through tiny puppets molded out of his special brand of radioactive clay. He is also Alicia's stepfather, which creates a whole can of worms time and time again. Again, I would not rule out the possibility of him being saved for a sequel. There's also the Wizard, aka Bentley Whitman, created by Jack, Stan, and Larry Lieber in 1962's Strange Tales number 102. Bentley is a prolific genius who uses his inventions to either scam rich people, fake magic tricks, or some combination of both. While he started out as one of Johnny's villains, he has since become a prolific part of the FF's Rogues Gallery. There's also a whole thing with his teenage clone known as Bentley 23. He was recently introduced on screen just a few months ago in Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man, where he's voiced by one of my favorite comedians in the world, Paul F. Tompkins. And then there's Diablo, created by Jack and Stan in 1941's Fantastic Four number 30. A 9th century alchemist turned businessman who got a near eternal life from a pact with Mephisto, he manages to gaslight Ben into becoming his muscle and freeing him from from his eternal prison, in exchange for a potion that seems to turn Ben back into a human. This all backfires when the potion is revealed to only have a temporary effect, and he is defeated and basically shunned from society as a snake oil salesman. Also, jumping ahead to when they're traveling to fight Galactus, I wonder if the offhanded reference to a space dragon means that this team has already fought Fing Fang Foom, who is the most well-known character that I can think of that fits that bill. Okay, now it's time to talk about Jack, and my favorite Easter egg in the entire movie. When the world is reacting to Shalabal's arrival, we briefly peer into the offices of Timely Comics, the real-life precursor to Marvel as we know it today, where two comic creators are working late at night. These are clearly meant to be the 60s versions of Jack and Stan, down to the artwork scattered across the office referencing Oog and various other Marvel monster characters. This little cameo genuinely took my breath away, both because Jack is rightly the focus of these frames, and because there is comic precedent for them existing within the Marvel universe and writing fictionalized comics about the FF's adventures. I also love that the credits end on a Jack quote, one that took me practically half the day to find, from a 1982 interview he did with Entertainment Tonight.
If you look at my characters, you'll find me. No matter what kind of character you create or assume, a little of yourself must remain there.
It makes me emotional even just thinking about it, but the fact that he's starting to genuinely get his flowers, even if the general audience doesn't exactly know who he is yet, makes me happy. I was telling y'all for a full calendar year that Pedro would nail it as Reed, and nobody believed me. I was genuinely astonished by his performance and how well he balances the dashing leading man energy with being a genuine nerd. The jokes about him scheduling a panic attack in his lab for later, his guilt stopping him from making new spacesuits for the team, the fact that he can't drive, which is canon, or cook, him oversharing at every available opportunity, even the fact that his stretching hurts at a certain point, which is also comic canon, and I loved not only seeing it, but the battle damage on his sweater afterwards. Going back to the transatlantic accent of it all, Pedro really gave a Cary Grant-esque performance, and I only wanted to see even more of it. I could also write paragraphs and paragraphs on Reed and Sue's dynamic. The tenderness, the pet names, the trust that they have in each other, the way that he calms her down when she's giving birth, it's beautiful. But again, I feel like we only scratched the surface of it. The You Being You Hurts Me scene fully stopped me in my tracks. It feels like such an apex for themselves and their relationship across media, without fully leading to them becoming estranged or some other soap opera nonsense. I'm sure I'm not alone in saying that I saw myself in them. But again, I wonder how that moment, or even just the initial pregnancy reveal, hit for people who haven't even already fallen in love with the characters yet. And I almost wish that we got a version of this movie that sold their love story to everyone so much more. On that note, there's a moment that Sue and Johnny share when Franklin is first born that I swore was going to hammer home the fact that Franklin is named after their dad. There's a whole separate conversation to be had about the four's upbringings and what they then bring to their relationship with Franklin, but I personally have always loved when stories acknowledge that Sue was essentially parentified from a very young age and had to raise herself and Johnny when she shouldn't have needed to. Instead, we get one line about how their dad, quote, wasn't perfect, which is fine, but again, it's only scratching the surface, especially when they then turn around and name their child after him. Maybe that plotline was in the script and just got lost along the way, but I wish that it hadn't been lost in translation for the larger audience. Galactus wanting Franklin to be his successor is not only funny, because you can tell just how tired this man is, but it does have some comic precedent. Not only did Franklin make Galactus his own herald in the mainline comics at one point, but the Earth X storyline, which was already on everyone's mind because of Shalabal's Silver Surfer, sees him literally evolving into Galactus. I like that we honored that here while doing something newer and a bit more straightforward, especially when things are about to get much more convoluted down the line. I also love the little world building of the Galactus cult, both because it feels incredibly on brand and because it brings home Jack's original intentions for Galactus and Surfer as religious figures. I am a sucker for civilians of superhero worlds bonding together to do good. I don't care if it's impractical or impossible in our real world. That's exactly what makes the use of it in superhero fiction so special. So the whole montage of everyone working together to build the bridges and the narration about how small groups of determined people can change the world because it's, quote, the only thing that ever has, really was sweet to me. Okay, let's get to the biggest pleasant surprise of the movie for me. Johnny. As I've said in previous videos, I feel like the cultural perception of Johnny as a hot-headed, chauvinistic sex symbol is missing the point, and this movie really starts to remedy that. Joseph Quinn's performance is so sweet, from little things like him calling Herbie Herbert and patting his head, to big things like how he takes it upon himself to decode Shalabal's language. Johnny is smart. He always has been in his own unique way, and the movie is unafraid to lean into that while also having fun with him being a flirt. On that note, they did streamline Shalabal's backstory a bit too much for my personal liking. Narrated by Lee and John Buscema in 1968's The Silver Surfer #1, she is actually not portrayed as a scientist or astronomer in the comics, but as an alien empress. Her lover at the time, Norrin Radd, actually sacrifices himself as Galactus's herald in order to save her planet, and she remains as its ruler in the years to follow. I feel like her origin and the guilt that she felt over leaving her people behind would have hit regardless of her occupation. And finally, this really is Sue Storm's movie in a way. Again, I have tried to spread the gospel about this woman on this channel for literal months, but I was still unprepared for the performance that Vanessa Kirby gave, especially after watching and rewatching the previous FF installments before this movie, where she is treated either as a sexist punchline or an absolute nothing burger. This was such a breath of fresh air. She is the most powerful team member. She is an excellent humanitarian. She is ruthless when she needs to be. She is able to be grounded in her emotions without being defined by them. I just, again, wanted to see that hammered home even further. Also, Herbie was handled perfectly. I love how increasingly tired he is of everyone's nonsense and his ever-growing list of responsibilities, and I love how each team member has a different sort of dynamic and interaction with him. When Sue opens the door at one point and just says, "Hello, Herbie," in the most casual way, I loved that so much. But also, what happened to him between the third act and the mid-credits scene? Did he get crushed by Galactus? He was rebuilt 4 years later, but it feels like an odd note to not wrap that up at all. What I had heard about the credits scene before this movie worried me. It's part of the reason why I made the spoiler video on this channel a couple months ago. I worried that the very last thing audiences would be left with was some sort of gratuitous setup for Doomsday and Secret Wars, and that it would override whatever they felt about the movie itself. As much as I have my own complicated feelings with it, I am glad that, in the grand scheme of things, that wasn't really the case here. And even then, the scene raises just about as many questions as it answers. Is Doom asking Franklin to turn his face into Tony Stark's? Is this the Doom of Earth 828? Earth 19999? Sorry, Kevin Feige, I am not calling it 616. Or another Earth entirely. Is Galactus' ship still chilling above Earth 4 years later? I guess we'll find out in a year or so. I'm also glad that the post-credit scene was just the fun little animated series intro, both because I feel like we collectively deserve a new FF animated series, and because it was fun seeing this specific world rendered in that way. We do get to see Malkovich's Red Ghost, at least in animation, as well as what looks like the Sentry Sinister and Dragon Man. Overall, like I said, this movie is a smorgasbord of Easter eggs and love for the FF comics that I am so glad exists. But even after eating from it twice, I am still finding myself hungry for more, which is not the best feeling to have. Part of me wishes that we could go to the world where the release date for this got delayed a couple months, everything got to cook a little bit longer, all while the movie got to fully stand on its own. I am probably going to rewatch it so many more times, but I just wish that this movie was as perfect as I had hoped that it was capable of. What did you think of the Fantastic Four First Steps? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with your friends if you haven't already done so. Merch is available at the link in the description. As always, you can find me on social media at Hey It's Jenna Lynn. Thank you all so much for watching, and as always, go read some comics.